Hey, Shalom! This is Dan. I want to talk to you today about one of our other Torah portions. Now, it's been a while since we talked about the Torah portions. We just got done celebrating Hanukkah, and I did a little focusing on Hanukkah there so you understand what it's all about. But I want to go back a couple weeks ago. We were in the Torah portion that begins to talk more in depth about Joseph. Now, you might remember from Genesis 37 or so, you start to read about Joseph, and we know that he was one of the sons of Isaac. I'm sorry, not Isaac. One of the sons of Jacob, and his mom was Rachel, who was the woman that Jacob had fallen in love with, and originally worked the 7 years for. Remember, he got tricked, so he ended up working a total of 14 years there, just in order to get Rachel to be his bride. But here we are, chapter 37, and we find out that Jacob, of all his sons, he is the most taken with Joseph. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that it was from Rachel, but he takes a liking to him. And because of this, he gives his son a coat of many colors. Now, this is a story we all probably heard growing up in Sunday school, Joseph and the coat of many colors. And it's debated about, was it the colors of the tribes or was it the colors of significant things that had happened? I don't really have an answer for you on that. I would venture to say, if I was going to be a guy who thought about it more in depth, I would venture to say that the reason that the brothers didn't really like him, not only because of the coat, but I'm thinking that in that coat there were the colors of his brother's tribes. Now, we know this from Middle Ages. That every family kind of had a crest or some kind of a seal or something, and especially in the Scottish communities and such, each pattern of plaid represents a certain clan, something like that. And so I'm wondering myself if that's kind of what it was here, where each of the tribes had their own color, had their own symbol, and was it possible that on the coat that Joseph got, that it had his brother's colors on it? We don't know specifically what it means by saying it was the coat of many colors. We don't know how many colors or what colors they were, but I would venture to say, if I was going to take a guess, that it might have had something to do with his brother's colors and symbols that made them a little bit more upset than normal. Now, already their father was showing him favoritism. Let's not get that, let's not fight on that. I think that's pretty clear. His father liked him more than the other brothers. And as we go on and we see the behaviors of the other brothers, that could play a factor there as well. But whatever it was, it caused some additional jealousy from the brothers. So when the time came and it was just right, and Joseph was coming out to meet his brothers in the fields there where they were tending to their sheep, his brothers saw an opportunity to make a couple bucks. Well, first of all, they saw an opportunity to get revenge, so they threw him into one of the cisterns. Big old pit where they used to store water and things like that, an empty well or such. And so when they heard the Midianites coming through, they decided that, the relatives of Ishmael, I'll get it right eventually here, when they heard them coming through, the jingle on their camels, and they saw the tribe's caravan coming through, they decided, let's make a few bucks. So this is where they decided that they're going to pull Joseph out of the cistern, and they're going to sell him. Now, in order for them to pull this off without their father thinking anything, they had to make a few tweaks in their plan there. And so one of the things that they did was they took the coat that they knew their father was going to recognize. They took the coat and they decided to tear it up a little bit, throw a little bit of animal blood on there, and pawn it off to their dad, saying that a wild animal had attacked them. I don't think they had any thoughts that this was going to come back years later and bite them in the booty. It's kind of obvious that they had no recollection, no idea that this was going to happen, because they kind of wiped their hands clean of it and said, whew, we got rid of Joseph, we are done, our lives will be great, Dad will all start liking us again, and we'll be good. But God had other plans, and we're going to find out those other plans as we go on here. Now let's move ahead though, and here we are, we're in Egypt with Joseph. And Joseph has been sold from the tribe now to the Egyptians, and he becomes the slave of Potiphar. Now here's one of the really cool things. Now, my dad passed away a couple years ago. It's actually December of 2010. And one of his favorite stories was the story of Joseph and how God worked everything out. But in order for God to work everything out, some bad things happened as well. One of the things that we find is that obviously Joseph was sold by his brothers into captivity, but we find also that Joseph had to endure some things that he was blamed for that were never really his fault. Now, he worked for Potiphar and he had favor with Potiphar. I love the fact, though, that God allowed Potiphar to see Joseph as the person who obeyed and not only obeyed, but he did above and beyond his call of duty. He was favored, and God gave him favor for a reason, because later on it would come back to be Joseph's blessing. But Potiphar saw that there was nothing that he could not trust Joseph with. Now, we don't know all that entails as well, but I don't doubt that Joseph had something to do with some of the big decisions that were being made in Potiphar's home. Maybe his finances, maybe the way that the animals were taken care of, maybe the construction, architecture, things like that. Whatever it was, God gave him favor. And Joseph didn't take that lightly. In fact, as we read on, we find that Potiphar's wife, she took a liking to him as well. She had favor herself for him. Now, I joke around when I was talking with my kids about this, and there's that song by Carly Rae Jepsen called Call Me Maybe. And I wonder sometimes if that might be the song that Potiphar's wife was singing at the time. You know, we read the story here where Potiphar's wife made an advancement on Joseph. You know, it says that she kept asking him, "Hey Joseph, will you go to bed with me? Joseph, will you be alone with me? Will you do this with me?" And it's almost like the song, you know, "Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number. Call me maybe." And I wonder if Potiphar's wife was saying the same thing. "Joseph, call me. Call me. I'll give you a good one-night stand, Joseph. We won't even let Potiphar know about it. Just be our little secret. Call me, baby. Call me." And you know, it came down to the point where Joseph was alone in Potiphar's house one day, and what happened? Sure enough, she came out of the woodwork and gave him a more blunt advance. "Joseph, go to bed with me. Lay with me." You know, maybe she knew some tantric art, or maybe she knew what was in style and all the good stuff that she wanted to blow his mind, maybe. But Joseph stood his ground. Here's the point I want to get across to you today, because I think we all have these times when we have the ability to be a Joseph. You see, we have the option of walking or running. This is how I look at it. Joseph, he walked, you know, he ran from sin. It says that when Potiphar's wife came and made his advancement, that he kept saying no. He said, "I can't do this to my God. I can't do this to my master. I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna lay with you." And it made her mad. And so she made these blunt advancements on him. And so what happened? He ran. He ran, and it cost him his tunic, which ended up putting him in jail because Potiphar trusted his wife. But it still is an indication of what we're supposed to do. When sin comes at us, are we supposed to walk into sin and say, "Here I am, take me"? Or are we supposed to run from sin? You know, in God's Word it says that God, when we're tempted, that God provides a way out. We find this in 1 Corinthians 10:13 and 14, that there's no temptation that has seized us except that which is common to man. But in those times of temptation, God makes a way out. And Joseph found that way out. And again, it cost him in his situation, because she ripped his tunic off and then she cried, "Rape! He tried to rape me!" when we know that that's not the case. But nonetheless, Joseph ran from sin. He wasn't going to sit around and say, "Yeah, I'm game," because he knew it was against what God had told him, had commanded. How many times, though, do we run, not necessarily away from sin, but to sin? We walk into these sinful advancements, and then we wonder why our life isn't being blessed. It's a good chance that Potiphar would not have known if Joseph had went ahead and slept with Potiphar's wife. But God would have known, and that makes a whole difference. So what I want to encourage you with as we close here is not to run into the arms of sin, not to walk or waltz or skip or jaunt into the arms of sin, but to run away. We see this in Hebrews 11 as well when it talks about Moses. And it says that Moses forsook the pleasures of sin for a season. Are we forsaking these pleasures of sin? Are we running away from the situation? That's the kind of person God's looking for. And when we read in the Bible, we read in the Torah, we see that that is why Joseph was blessed. Not only did God have his hand on Joseph from the beginning, but because of the choices that Joseph made, he kept in God's favor. And he kept in God's blessing. And yes, he was in prison, and we'll read about this the next time. There were some struggles that he went through, but through it all, God was working his own plan. And God blessed Joseph for not giving in, for not going about and walking into the sin and sleeping with Potiphar's wife. Let this be a challenge for us. Let us stop walking into sin and run from it. It might be hard. It might be tempting. But there's always going to be a way out. Will we be like Joseph and find it and run? I hope so. I'm Dan. Shalom.